Okay, folks, good morning again, and welcome to the WASDE Trade Room, 10-minute trades. My name is Lee Goldstein. I'm the trading director. Please remember all the trades we discuss are for educational purposes. It is possible to lose money trading futures, so trade carefully, please. Okay, so we're back in the room for WASDE. So what's a WASDE? All right, WASDE is a grain report. The World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate. That's what WASDE stands for. World Agriculture Supply and Demand Estimates. And it's a report that has been trading well, and it's going through a little bit difficult times right now. Um, and that's just the way it is. I'm sure that it'll get back to trading fine again, but we have to deal with it while it's trading in a more challenging fashion. So last month, I thought I would outsmart the WASDE and trade a soybean trap trade. And we had quite an anomaly take place. It was maybe the biggest breakout in the past year, if not longer. And the biggest enemy to a trap trade is a gigantic move in one direction. So let me show you what happened. So we have a setup for a trap trade on corn and on soybeans, both. And we were trading it on soybeans. And frankly, no setup could have survived, no trap trade could have survived the type of move that soybeans had. Watch it, it just explodes through all the prices, way past your stop, everything. There's nothing you can do when you're trading a trap that moves in that manner. It is what happens when things go south. Now, soybeans are difficult to trade with WASDE. They tend to whip a lot more than corn. They're much less volume, less liquidity with soybeans. So I'm going to go back to the corn trap this month. And look, I'm not saying don't trade the breakout on soybeans, but I'm saying it can get filled early. It can create a whipsaw. So you just have to be aware that it can be a difficult setup. Even the trap trade sometimes moves so fast on soybeans that you could have a profit and it disappears before you can get your profit by moving your targets into an area of profit. It just much harder to trade soybeans on this report. So I certainly think that it's unlikely to have two trap trades in a row that don't work on soybeans. But just with all the testing that I've been doing, corn is much more stable and manageable to trade. So that's what I'm going to go with today. And then we'll do an analysis how the markets move, and we'll see. I'll worry about next month, but right now for this month, I think the trap trade is an acceptable setup, because even when there's a winning breakout on corn, the trap trade also can be a winner. So that's a big a big issue also. So I think right now the trap, with all the reversals that this particular event has, I think the trap trade will give us the best shot for a profit, and I think corn makes the most sense. So that's how I'm going to set it up. So let me show you what my setup's going to be. Let me turn my recorder on. Let's get the recorder going. Now, this is a report that calendars don't have news results, but we will know when the event takes place because you get filled. It's an event that fills. It's very, very rare that nothing happens. Now, you could get a trap trade that doesn't fill you. That's possible. And that's not the end of the world either. Sometimes a trade, doesn't move far enough, an instrument. Now, the breakout on corn's been at best 50-50. And I say at best because we did not have a winner in June on the breakout on this month. Now, I do trade it a tiny bit differently than the DMM. I use a slightly bigger bracket and a slightly bigger stop. Okay. So the trap trade is down here, and I'll show you how I'm going to trade it. So I'm going to right click the chart, click on strategies, click on trap trade. And then the items that you're going to adjust. First thing to do is what time is this event? 12 noon, okay? So the time of the event, if you're on the East Coast like I am, 12 goes in right here, okay? 12. That actually tells the software what time the event is going to take place. That's sort of like your activation time, okay? But there's also an activation field, and what that does, if you notice, it's 5 seconds before 12 o'clock. So activation time, you put a 5 in because 5 seconds before the event takes place, our orders are going to show up on the chart. 5 seconds before the event takes place, our orders will show up on the chart. That's what that means. So the time of the event is 12 and the activation is 5. 5 seconds before 12, our orders are going to show up. Then you notice you've got tiers and a stop. Now I've been using a 25 stop, so I'll continue with that. And the tiers are a range. You can use anything between 18 and 21 to anything between 28 and 30. So it's sort of like a bracket that has a range. Instead of it being 3, it might be 3, 4, or 5. So I'm going to use position 1 as a 1, position 2 as a 1. My stop is 25. And my tier 1, I'm going to use 18. And my tier 2 is going to be 30. Time of the event is 12. Activation preparation seconds is 5. So 5 seconds before the event, my orders are going to show up on the chart. And that's it. There's not a lot of inputs on a trap trade. So the idea is we're expecting, and this is corn. So we'll call it trap corn. Apply it, okay it, put my charts on. And I'm going to check my time sync to see if my computer's in sync. Okay, so my computer's not in sync. So if that's the case, I use Dimension 4. It's a program that we supply. You can download it. It's in the room drive in the trade room. So if my time is not in sync, I close time is, and when I click on Dimension 4, it brings me this screen. And the way that Dimension 4 works is it syncs to the server chosen for the location. And then what you want to do is look at the line that says synchronized when you press the sync now button. And when you see that line change, your computer should be put in sync. So I just press it like 10 times. I watch this synchronized line. It usually changes a couple of times. And then I close Dimension 4 and I go back to time is to see what the deal is, if I'm back in sync. And I am back in sync. And the tick value of ZC and ZS is 1250. Correct, Caesar. It's like the S&P 500 futures. 1250. Now you could trade the trap trade on soybeans. There's also a breakout setup. I'm going with the trap on corn because through the past 6 months, the biggest downside was that on a couple of trades, you had to wait 4 minutes or longer for profit to be given. However, it worked on most of the trades. And it's usually manageable to try and get your profit out of a trap trade. Soybeans in general have been much more challenging to trade. Last month, like I said, we did have that anomaly where the move was so large, unusually large. It hadn't moved that way in over a year. So, of course, that was a surprise. That might make this month's trap trade more probable. It's possible. So there is a trap trade setup. And it's larger. In other words, the tiers are bigger. The tiers are bigger. So you might start your tiers, for instance, at 29 to 42, because usually the move, excuse me, usually the move on soybeans can be bigger. So the trap trade tiers, for instance, I would start at 20 and I would do something like 20 and 40. 20 and 42 if I were going to trade soybeans. That's how I would do the trap trade. 29 is a little big. So if there's not a very big move, you might not get filled. But if there's a small move and it still reverses, if you use the little bit smaller tier on your first tier, you might get filled. So it would be okay to use the tiers on soybeans of 20 and 40. Stop of 22 to 25 is fine. And it's the same activation seconds, 5 seconds before a 12 o'clock event. And then on either instrument, you can also try the breakouts. The breakouts, they have been somewhat challenged. Now, soybeans look a little better, but I'm pretty certain that in March, we did not have a winner on the soybean breakout. And it was a very small spike, and it did a big reversal. But if you're going to trade soybeans on a breakout, I'd probably use a 10 bracket and a 14 stop. I'd increase my stop by 2 and also the bracket. On corn, I would use an 8 bracket and a 12 stop if I was going to trade the breakout. And be aware that it's very possible you could get fairly quick directional changes on this event. Now, one of the issues, because of the way that corn and soybeans trade, the times of their trading sessions. When you set up the chart, when you look at your chart, you want to go to your data series and use the trading hours default 24/7. Trading hours default 24/7. It'll work if you use trading times, but your pivots and calculated support and resistance that you might be using will be properly calculated if you use default 24/7. It won't affect the trade. So the idea of a trap trade, as everybody knows, is we expect if we're moving up in price, we're going to sell the market. And if we're moving down in price, we're going to buy the market. Okay? So we're going to go the opposite direction of what the price does. Let me see, just for fun, let's take a quick look. I'm not sure how much information we can see in last month's movement. So last month on the right, you could see the way corn moved on the report. So corn was pretty whippy. So corn actually looked like it would have been a good trap trade. Okay. Last month, corn looked like a good trap trade. That's the kind of move that often lends itself very well to the trap trade. So here's the move with corn. It went down, then up. So if it went down far enough to fill you, when it reversed, that's where you'd get your profit. So Eva, yeah, I'm doing a trap trade on this report. I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to trade corn. And the trap trade, I'm using tiers of 18 and 30. Remember that the time of the event should be set to 12. It's a noon event. And then the activation time, how long before noon, how many seconds before noon are my orders going to show up on the chart? Where they're going to show up on the chart 5 seconds before noon. So the activation time is a 5. And then I've got one position on for tier 1, one position on for tier 2, and I'm using a stop of 25. You don't really have to adjust anything else on the trap trade. And I also said that if people wanted to trade the soybean trap trade, they could. The tiers are bigger. On soy, the tiers, I would start my tiers at 20, and my second tier would be 42. And then everything else is fine. 5 seconds activation, 12 o'clock event, same setup. Just the tiers are different. Basically, the stop can be anywhere between 22 and 25. And then if you want to trade the breakout, the only thing I would do differently, I might increase my bracket to 10 on soybeans and a stop of 14 to 15. And if I was going to trade the breakout on corn, I would definitely use an 8 bracket and at least a 12 stop on corn. I think the targets are okay, especially in light corn, and especially in light of corn, the breakouts being difficult. And I did say that it is possible we could wind up waiting 3 or 4 minutes for the trap trade to generate profits. It doesn't automatically mean it's not going to work if the profits come slowly. I'd rather get a quick reversal and, a quick move and then a reversal. It's always preferable, but it doesn't always work that way. Now, just to give you a concept of, if we go back to April, and I'm sure in April we were trading a breakout on corn, and we were. And here's what's interesting. So the breakout, it works very nicely on corn. And on WASDE, you just wait to get filled. I would not normally cancel the trade. So April, it hits the first target. And so you could see, so yes, it worked as a breakout. But what's interesting is when I tested the trap, it works as a trap also. It worked as a trap also. It took longer because it was a better breakout. It took 4 to 5 minutes. but it still worked as a breakout and as a trap. It worked as both. The targets, choose your targets. They're on the DMM. You've got 7 and 17, Darren. You could certainly go, 9 and 22 if it's a good breakout. And the stop I'm using is 14 with an 8 bracket on corn. That's how I'm doing corn. One of the things that we see with soybeans is just a lot of whipping, sometimes early fills, definitely less stability in the instrument. But, a year ago we had no question about how we were going to trade. The WASDE report, it was never a question. It was always a breakout. But we've gone through some challenging reports, and there's no law that says you're not allowed to change your setups. Especially in a report that has a propensity to reverse. So look, if it explodes in one direction, that's our enemy. Okay? That's the enemy of a trap trade. But if it reacts normally, then there's a very good chance the trap trade can grab some profit. And then we'll come back in the room at 12:30 for the bond auction. So 5 seconds before the news, the trap trade tiers will show up on the chart. That's how it works. So we got about a minute and a half to go. Now a little bit longer. Now also remember you've got buttons. If only one tier gets filled, you can cancel the outer tier with the cancel button. You don't have to, but it cleans the charts up and makes it easier to trade. Certainly the war in Ukraine can have an effect and could be having an effect on this report because they're one of the largest exporters of grains in the world. So it's very possible that the war has been having an effect on the behavior of this report. Now, this early movement also is more worrisome to a breakout trade than to a trap. A trap trade can survive early movement, but sometimes a breakout won't because you'll get filled on the wrong side. Okay, so soybeans look like they started early. Now look, I didn't get filled yet in corn. So we might not, soybeans look like a better trap They got filled, I would guess. I would guess. So I'll give it a minute or so. I think we'll get filled. Okay, so there's our fill. So now, if it pulls back down, see, we only filled one tier, okay? Only one tier has filled. Now, I can cancel my outer tier because it doesn't look like it's going to fill. I'm not getting a heck of a lot of movement here. So forgive me for making my chart look crazy. So I made $150 on that trade. Okay. It wasn't a gigantic move, which means it's probably not going to be a gigantic reversal. Okay. It wasn't a gigantic move, so it probably won't be a gigantic reversal. Soybeans, I think they triggered early, but we'll look at the video in a minute. Let's watch the price action. I made 150 back. I suppose I could have front loaded my first tier, and maybe I'll start doing that come next month. Give me a roll call and tell me if you traded. I'd be curious if anyone traded and how you traded. So I took a profit because I was a little bit concerned. It wasn't a giant move. When it's not a giant move, sometimes it'll just hang around or just not give you good reversals. So I was able to take $150 out of that trade with just one tier. And it was the right thing to do because now it's going against me very strongly. I'd be losing money right now. Darren, did you trade the trap or did you trade the breakout? Trap. Okay, good. Eva, did it? I was watching corn. Did it trigger early or did it trigger properly? I mean, as long as your orders were on the chart. Okay, Eva, I could have warned you not to do that. That there's a lot of no fills on that second tier with corn. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were going to do that. I'm sorry I didn't say anything about that. In other words, what Eva did, and it is a way to try to mitigate risk. You just take the outside tier, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And that way, if it's a very small, crappy move, you don't get filled. And you don't have to deal with whether there's not a good reversal or there is a good reversal. You understand? If you take that smaller, if you take the further tier, you have to have a good move. And there's not always a good move. Let's take a look. So it looks like soybeans might have worked as a breakout. I'm so glad I didn't trade soybeans as a trap trade. I mean, I really would have thought the odds would have been in our favor on soybeans. You don't generally get two traps in a row that don't work. Did anyone else trade? Anyone else trade? Level two, okay. You traded with the trap. The trap on corn, I think, is pretty solid. I think it's a pretty solid trade. So, but what you don't want to have happen is you get filled and then it never reverses. And that's almost what it looks like soybeans did. Soybeans, look, they're reversing now, but they went up too far. So let's take a look at the video. I think that soybeans on the breakout might have been the best trade today. So, it's looking like soybeans are trading better and better as a breakout. So if they are, we'll start moving over to soybeans. That's all. But I do like the trap on corn still. So let's take a look. Give me a second to get the video set. Okay, so here's the video. Watch the right side. I looked over at soybeans and they had already fired off. I'm just thinking that they moved early. And that's one of the reasons we put our orders on the chart a couple of seconds early rather than just 1 second. So I'm watching over here in real time.